The meeting to order, and we have the Minister of Finance, Mr. Morneau, here. We're really still doing our study of pre-budget consultations for 2020, Understanding Order 1082. Minister, we have a request because of the makeup of committee now. The official opposition is 4 members. They'd all like to get on. Is it possible to stay 10 minutes longer?
There are 4, I think I see 5.
Yeah, but there's only 4 going to ask questions.
Okay. Who's not going to ask questions?
You count correctly.
Pat's not asking questions? Well, on that basis, yes. I mean, had it been Pat, I think the answer would have been a clear no.
You too, Mr. Minister, let it keep your remarks pretty tight. So, okay, with that, we will go to the Minister for your opening statement, and thank you very much for coming, Minister. We look forward to an informative session. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And as you can see, I have some colleagues from the Finance Department here with me. So if there are questions that any of you would prefer to send their way, I'm obviously happy to acquiesce. So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of this committee. Merci de m'avoir invité.
Thank you for having invited me to come and speak before you today. I congratulate you and I thank you for the work that you have accomplished in the framework of your own pre-budgetary consultations.
Budget. I think the first thing that we need to think about is where we are right now and how we got there. As shown in our latest economic and fiscal update in December, our economy is doing well and continues to grow at a good pace. In fact, we're on track to have the second fastest growing economy in the G7 this year. Depuis 2015, le travail acharné des Canadiens.
Since 2015, the hard work of Canadians, supported by investments, has made it possible to create more than 1 million jobs, most of them full-time jobs. The unemployment rate stands at a historic low. Companies' profits are substantial, and salaries and wages are increasing.
From continuing protectionism around the world to the near-term challenges raised by coronavirus. Overall, Canada's net debt to GDP ratio remains the lowest among G7 countries, keeping our country in an enviable position among our peers. Our relatively low level of debt is a major competitive advantage, and we as a government remain fully committed to maintaining it in an unpredictable world. Around the world, we've also seen the easing of trade tensions between the U.S. and China. At home, we're calling for all parliamentarians to support swift passage of the new NAFTA, the CUSMA agreement. It's a good deal for Canadians, and it will bring more certainty for us in our trade with our most important partner. We want to build on the progress of the last 4 years in a way that's responsible and that makes a real difference in the lives of Canadians and sets us up for the future. Nous devons continuer de...
We must continue investing in Canadians and encouraging economic growth while remaining financially responsible.
Continue moving forward with our plan to strengthen and grow the middle class, make life more affordable, and prepare Canada for the future. Our parliamentary priority when the 43rd Parliament opened was to introduce a proposal to lower taxes. This proposal would raise the basic personal amount to $15,000 by 2023 and lower taxes for close to 20 million Canadians. By 2023, single individuals could save close to $300 in taxes each year, while families, including those led by a single parent, could save nearly $600 per year in taxes. About 1 million more Canadians will no longer pay taxes, federal income taxes, in 2023 on this basis. To ensure that this tax relief goes to the people that need it most, we are also planning on phasing out the benefits of the increased basic personal amount for wealthy individuals. This proposal, combined with measures like the Canada Child Benefit and middle-class tax cut introduced by our government, would see a typical family of 4 be better off more than $2,300 this year compared to 2015. Once the proposed increase in the basic personal amount is fully phased in 2023, this family will be better off by more than $2,800 every year. Nous savons que le budget fédéral de cette année.
We know that this year's federal budget will be an opportunity for us to bring in other measures that will improve people's lives throughout the country. In order to do this, we invite all Canadians to express their ideas on how we can go about continuing to ensure the growth of the middle class and of the economy. As you are aware, Canada's Finance Department holds consultations every year, pre-budgetary consultations, alongside the important work done by your committee. These consultations enable us to interact directly and openly with the largest possible number of Canadians, in particular, stakeholders and leaders in the community, to make sure that their viewpoints may be taken into consideration in the process of preparing the 2020 budget. My colleagues, Minister Fortier, Parliamentary Secretary Fraser, and myself have launched our pre-budgetary consultations on January 13th, and since then, we have organized roundtables and discussion sessions that are open throughout the country. During these consultations, we have been hearing directly what Canadians have to say to us about the subjects of most concern to them. I organized an open discussion in my riding and 2 roundtables in the Canadian West, in Vancouver and in Calgary, where I had the opportunity to hear comments from young people, business leaders, and community leaders concerning their priorities regarding the 2020 federal budget. Canadians also expressed their priorities concerning the 2020 budget by email, mail, online surveys, and at roundtables. This year, the pre-budget consultations have been focusing on points that we are aware of that are important to Canadians: strengthening the middle class, protecting the environment, maintaining health and security of Canadians, and continuing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Through these consultations, Canadians are able to express themselves on topics such as the following: what works best and what concerns them? What can we do to continue to make the cost of living more affordable? How can we create more good jobs that are well paid? How can we continue to strengthen the middle class? What can the government do to deal with climate change? What can we do to ensure the security of our communities? What measures can we adopt in order to improve reconciliation? How can we build a more viable future for everyone? Since Monday, we have been reading comments from more than 18,000 Canadians through our online survey. And the questions in the survey are drawn from 4 themes that I mentioned earlier. Canadians have up until February 21st to send in their ideas before we end the consultation period.
Work has been focused on the theme of our transition to a low-carbon economy, and I want to take a moment to outline the work that our government's doing. Notre gouvernement a présenté le tout premier plan national canadien en matière de changement.
Concerning climate change, we have heard what Canadians think, and since then we've made targeted investments to build an economy with a low carbon footprint. This includes investments in energy efficiency for households, schools, hospitals, universities, municipalities, Indigenous communities, businesses, and many more. These projects will contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enable Canadians to reduce their energy bills.
Public transit, helping reduce pollution and congestion. We're also investing in renewables, in clean tech, and giving business incentives to find innovative ways to reduce their emissions. As the low-carbon economy grows, we're making sure to attract and create the jobs of the future here in Canada. We'll keep working to reduce emissions and to grow the economy. As we prepare Budget 2020, we'll take the ideas of Canadians, put them towards our work to build an economy that works for everyone, that keeps Canadians safe and healthy, that protects our environment, and moves Canada forward on a path to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and we'll go to the first round, which will consist of Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Fragascatis, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Julian. It'll be 6-minute round, and we'll hold people to that. Mr. Poilievre.
What is the daily cost to the Canadian economy of the current rail blockade?
This is obviously a question that is very important, not only for this committee but for Canadians. We are paying very close consideration to the economic impacts of the situation we're in as we work to negotiate towards a peaceful conclusion.
How much is the daily cost to the Canadian economy?
As you can appreciate, this is a fluid situation, one which we are working together with industry, with Canadians to get ourselves to, as I said, a negotiated situation. And we're watching those impacts, trying to reduce them through discussions and ways that we can actually, relieve the situation as we work through this negotiation.
Do you know the daily cost to the Canadian economy of this rail blockade?
As I think you might know, the impacts are significant on multiple fronts, and they're impacting people individually, as well as individual businesses. And as the situation is very fluid, it's something we're staying on top of, but unable to come to conclusions with that level of precision.
A coalition of business groups say that $500 million of goods are not moving every day as a result of this blockade. But we want to know the real cost of your government's inaction and your unwillingness to enforce the rule of law and bring this illegal blockade to an end. So if you could please send in writing to us the daily costs that our economy is absorbing as a result of your inaction on this issue, we'd really appreciate it. On to the next issue of cost. What would be the cost to all three levels of government of a decision by the federal government to kill the Teck Frontier mine in northern Alberta?
I appreciate the question. The Teck Frontier decision is an important decision. It's obviously gone through a rigorous process, a process that is coming before Cabinet in the near term. And one of the things that we'll be considering is all of the information that's brought forward as we determine the right step forward for Canada.
How much revenues would governments lose if the project did not go forward?
As I said, what we know is important is that we consider the rigorous process, the information that comes to Cabinet, to look at the right decision on this going forward, and we will do that, and it's coming soon.
So you don't know the cost to the governments of killing the Teck Frontier mine. It is reported to be $70 billion that the governments, all three levels, will lose if your government kills this project. You claim that your government has been negotiating with First Nations regarding the blockade. Since the blockade began, has your government met with any of the 20 First Nations communities who whose elected councils have approved and support the Coastal GasLink since the blockade began?
The situation we find ourselves in is obviously one that's extremely challenging. We know that the path forward has to consider our objective, which is to get to a peaceful conclusion that allows our economy to function and respects all parties to this situation.
But yesterday, the Prime Minister's remarks didn't even acknowledge the existence of the 20 First Nations communities who have signed agreements to support the Coastal GasLink. It sounds to me like their voices don't matter to this government. Really harkens back to a sort of a colonialist mentality where the government just ignores people it disagrees with and only talks to those with whom it agrees. Why hasn't your government engaged with those 20 First Nations communities that desperately want this project to go ahead so that they can lift themselves out of poverty and give hope to their young people? Why aren't you engaging with those First Nations communities?
Minister has the floor. Minister, go ahead.
Well, with respect, I wouldn't agree with that characterization. I think that it's important for us to consider all of the parties to this situation, and that includes the peoples engaged themselves. That includes their elected representatives. That includes the hereditary chiefs. That, of course, includes the businesses that are impacted and the people across Canada that are impacted by the situation.
So no meetings
So
with
I'm not yet quite finished. So we're not excluding anyone from those discussions, and we will work as hard as we can and in a cooperative fashion to get to a conclusion that will be positive for the people engaged in this and positive for our economy.
Good time. Go ahead.
So we don't know, the minister doesn't know the cost of the blockade per day to the Canadian economy. He doesn't know the cost to governments of blocking the tech frontier mine. He won't tell us if he's engaged with the 20 First Nations communities that actually support the Coastal GasLink. Last question then. The government has already introduced deficits numbers that are much bigger than the numbers published before the election. And these numbers that we now have do not include any of the spending measures that the Liberal Party of Canada put in its electoral platform. When all of those spending promises are implemented, how big will the deficit get?
I think it's an absolutely correct point that that during the election campaign we talked about investments that we want to make in Canadians, as all other parties did, by the way, and that's an important part of the electoral process. We're working through our budget right now in order to think about how we can demonstrate fiscal responsibility and how we can assure that Canadians can meet up to affordability challenges. We remain committed to reducing our debt to GDP. You know, we were left by the previous Stephen Harper government that you were part of with a debt to GDP and a rate of unemployment, both of which that were too high, as well as a challenging growth situation. So we've been able to reduce our debt to GDP. We've been able to significantly reduce unemployment, and of course we've been able to increase growth. So we plan on continuing on that path.
Okay, over to Mr. Fragiskatis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here and the work that you're doing. On the point of deficits, and I know my colleagues have raised such matters in previous meetings through our consultations. Could you tell us your thoughts on what the effects would be on the average Canadian and indeed the wider Canadian economy if in the upcoming budget our government was to immediately move towards balancing the budget in an austerity budget?
Well, I think first of all I would say that it's important for me not to engage in hypotheticals. So I just want to be absolutely clear that we are not thinking about changing our approach. We believe that investing in Canadians is important. We see that the advantage we've created in terms of growth, in terms of unemployment, has been very advantageous for people and for our economy more broadly. Clearly, taking a significant amount out of the economy rapidly would have an impact on growth, a negative impact on growth, and would have a negative impact as a result on things like employment and on things like wage growth. So those the exact implications can be estimated, but we can't get to absolute certainty. But we can absolutely see that there'd be negative growth. There would be negative on employment, and there would be negative on actual income to people. And so it's not a path that we intend to go down.
Okay. In your comments, you talked about the environmental focus of the government. And this is indeed one of the themes of the budget consultations that have been carried out. Mark Carney, as you know, is working on such matters, looking at the economy, looking at the environment, and the shift towards a green economy. I'm just going to read a quote that he recently put forward and get your thoughts. He says as follows: "There will be industries, sectors, and firms that do very well during this process because they will be part of the solution. But there will also be ones that lag behind, and they will be punished. Companies that don't adapt will go bankrupt without question." Do you have, can you tell us the work that the government has done and wants to continue doing to help the private sector transition to a green economy in Canada?
I think it's important that we work together as Canadians to ensure that that businesses don't actually face that dire outcome that was predicted. Our goal is to make sure that we have economic growth and that we are able to turn to a cleaner, greener economy that allows our businesses to continue to be successful. So one of the things that I did together with the Minister of Environment last year is started a sustainable finance review that came out with some important recommendations on how we could ensure that companies deal with the ramifications of a climate change, that make sure that they represent their situation so that investors can take appropriate decisions. That will encourage companies, I believe, to take those issues seriously and create a more sustainable path for themselves, and also therefore more sustainable for our country and for the world. So that's an important effort. I think we will continue to think about ways that we can ensure that the companies are moving in the right direction. Certainly putting a price on carbon, what it does is it provides a price method for companies to make the correct decisions. And we also can think about not only sticks but carrots, so things that we can invest in together with other Canadians to get us to a greener future. And that's some of the thinking we're doing right now as we look towards Budget 2020.
I've asked a question relating to the private sector when it comes to the environment. I also want to ask you a question that really pertains to our work with municipalities. We heard in our pre-budget consultations at least 4 organizations, including one mayor, the Mayor of London, Ontario, came and testified on the need to help municipalities with their transit fleets. They're very interested in electric buses. And I just wanted to put it to you, Minister, what in your mind can the federal government do to assist in the transition? Obviously, it's a complex one because there's the necessary charging infrastructure, the buses. This is new technology that we see. There's been a few pilot projects in the past, but nothing en masse. Do you have any thoughts on how the federal government can effectively work with municipalities in this regard as they seek to transition from diesel fleets to electrified fleets?
That's something that I also heard when I met with the mayors a couple of weeks ago as an initiative that they're keen on. It's clearly one that has different impacts for different cities across the country that are in different situations. I think the focus of your work around pre-budget consultations is helping to get those sort of ideas to the fore so that we can analyze them and determine what are the things that we should be trying to invest in that are going to have the biggest impact on reducing our carbon emissions. That is certainly one. I don't have any details on what we might or might not do in the budget yet. It's not appropriate to do that.
That's fine.
But as we think about places to invest, we will be thinking about the biggest opportunity from those investments. And then, of course, in the case of municipalities, we always need to think about how the actual delivery mechanism would work, because we need to work together with provinces and municipalities, and that's something that's forefront in our minds as well. We want to be able to ensure that the desired impact actually happens through the mechanisms that are available to us.
Okay, thank you both. Turning to Mr. St. Marie and then Mr. Julian. Mr. St. Marie.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Minister. I'd like to draw your attention to an aspect in your mandate letter that the Prime Minister gave you, and I quote, modernize the anti-avoidance laws to prevent large multinationals from avoiding tax through accounting strategies that are sophisticated between countries. So, in a few words, when I read this, it says, make illegal what's immoral, the legal use of tax havens by large companies. And here I'm referring to what the FMI calls offshore financial centers. In its jurisdictions, these companies pay zero tax or very little, and they use the principle of not being doubly taxed in their sophisticated accounting strategies to avoid paying any tax here. To me, this is a question of tax inequity, and what makes that strategy legal is to subsections 5907 of the tax regulations. One of them is the regulation 5907, subsection 11.2c, which specifies that the exclusion of companies that have a tax advantage in Barbados does not apply, quite simply. So this makes Section 30 of the treaty inoperative. And despite what the Canada-Barbados Treaty says, in spite of what the law says, Canadian companies can repatriate the profits from Barbados without paying tax on it. And in 2009, that was added to an appendix of a Budget Implementation Act where the government will insert a section that's called tax credits for medical costs that doesn't even deal with medical tax credits. And there's a proposal for an amendment to the tax regulations that has nothing to do with medical expenses, which is section 590711 of the regulations that specifies that even if there are information sharing agreements that are not under these treaties, that certain companies protected. If Canada concludes an agreement for a general tax information exchange, it can be retroactive to 2007. So we had both 22 new tax havens and a couple of new ones. Grenada, where the tax rate is 0. And because it's 0, companies don't have to provide tax returns or reports. So there's no information. So what I want to ask you is to answer this aspect of the mandate letter. Are you considering removing those tax regulations that allow legal use of tax havens? And can we expect to see that in the budget? Thank you. That is a question. So as you're aware, it's a very important aspect for our system. We have to make sure our system operates and that the results are fair. As you explained, it's part of my mandate letter to consider how we can assure Canadians that our system operates properly. And we are doing this. We've done a lot over the last 4.5 years. Yes, but we have worked together with other countries like the Common Reporting System with OECD, like the BEPS approach. This is very important because with the changes in our system internationally, we have to do things together or we'll have other problems afterwards. But for more information, I believe that Andrew, who is a taxation professor, can explain our approach more to assure you that the measures that are necessary are being considered this year and also in the coming years, because we have to continue to take measures because the situation is continually changing with companies that find new ways of improving their situation. Thank you for your answer. Before we hear Mr. Marcelin, I would like to remind you that Canada still remains late or behind the times compared to other countries with the OECD proposed measures. So there's much to be done there. And like in the fight against climate change, this will be done with nations collaborating, but we mustn't wait for everything to be solved elsewhere before we act. And I would like to remind you that these two regulations, in my opinion, as they contradict the legislation, they could be quite illegal, but as they've never been disputed, they remain in force. So I encourage you to take a close look at these regulations, and now I can hear the explanations from Mr. Marcelin.
I think it's important, as the Minister indicated, to point out that these are issues that are best approached in a multilateral fashion through the base erosion and profits shifting approach being one aspect of that. I think it's also important to understand the nature of how profits are taxed across countries. For example, Canada, like most other countries, does not tax active business income derived from abroad. But on the other hand, we have a very rigid, very strict approach to taxing investment income abroad, the foreign accrual property income rules. So we've made a number of changes over the recent years, Common Reporting Standard, the multilateral instrument, which essentially addresses treaty shopping issues, but does so in an organized fashion with other countries, and also invested very significant amounts in international audit activity by the Canada Review Agency.
We'll have to end it there, Mr. Julian, and then up to Mr. Morantz.
Thanks very much, Minister Morneau, for being here today. You'll recall the last time I questioned you at Finance Committee, we talked about the cost of Trans Mountain Pipeline. And at the time, you indicated that there was no updated construction schedule around Trans Mountain, and that you thought the figures at the time, $7.4 billion, did not need to be updated. Now, subsequently to that, of course, we found out that the construction costs have now ballooned to more than $12 billion, $12.6 billion, including the purchase cost. We're now talking about over $17 billion now, all assumed by the public purse, at the same time as Trans Mountain is losing, after interest charges, you'll agree, about $150 million a year. Now, we had important testimony on February 3rd from your finance officials that said that basically the financing of Trans Mountain on the public dime would occur through the Canada account of the EDC, which is subject to approval from yourself and the Minister of International Trade. So my first question is, what is the limit in terms of what you are prepared to have the taxpayers assume around Trans Mountain? What is the criteria? Because construction costs already, even from the estimate of 2 weeks ago, seem to be increasing. So we could well have other surprises. Secondly, the fact that Trans Mountain has now admitted that construction costs have increased allows the shippers now to pull out with the revised fee schedule. Now, there's only two doors. One is that there's a revised fee schedule, shippers pull out, and the whole Trans Mountain House of Cards collapses. Or the other, of course, is subsidies from the federal government to under support the actual cost of shipping. Is the federal government, is the Ministry of Finance contemplating subsidies to the shippers to keep Trans Mountain afloat? Those are my two questions to start.
Well, thank you. And you started by talking about previous discussions around this table. I think it's important to note that the previous estimates were made by Kinder Morgan, and they were made a number of years ago. The costs that were announced by the company a couple of weeks ago were the costs that they determined based on the status of the project, the time that's gone on from the previous estimate of the previous company, the improved environmental standards, the increased consultations with Indigenous peoples, and the increased benefit agreements that came as a result of that. So there was a significant change, of course, in that, and in a transparent way, the company came forward with their costs.
Sorry, Minister, I only have 6 minutes, so those two questions.
To the Minister, I'll have two.
So,
Go ahead, Minister.
to your more specific questions, we have a process. Of course, the company goes to CDEV around funding, and that funding request then comes through and goes through the Treasury Board, and yes, is funded through the Canada account, like the previous decision of the Conservative government before us around the General Motors happened as well. The shippers' costs, of course, those we have commitments from those shippers in terms of them to picking up the costs as they have the pipeline in play once it's completed. And to your final question, no, the government's not considering any subsidies to shippers.
Thank you. OK. Je vais passer à d'autres questions d'abord.
So I'll move on to other questions now. We've had an answer from the Minister of Finance to questions that we asked a few weeks ago. First of all, on tax havens, it would appear that the Department of Finance does not agree with the estimates that were made by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, even though the Parliamentary Budget Officer spoke about the fact that these tax havens and that there are huge amounts, $25 billion were mentioned, really goes against the spirit of the legislation on income. And if you do not agree with the number of 25 billion, then what internal numbers do you have at the Finance Department? And secondly, when we refer to drug insurance in your mandate letter, it talks about implementing a universal drug plan. You have the Pharmacare Now Coalition asking for this to be applied. What is the department's assessment to bring a universal tax, or a universal drug system? Two very different questions. As I said a few minutes ago, to ensure Canadians that our system is fair, we have to keep working with other countries to make sure that companies will not work against us. We work with OECD to improve our situation. And every year, we consider the measures that we can take. For example, now in 2020, we're considering how we can ensure our system will work. So nothing to be said today, but much to be done. Secondly, as we said, the approach for a universal pharmacare system is very important. We have to consider how we can work with the provinces to make sure that we have a true approach that will work in the future. And that's why we will begin with the things we can do together. High-cost drugs for rare diseases is a good example. We'll continue to work with the provinces to find a solution to reduce the cost of drugs and to make sure that each person in our country has the necessary access to drugs. Both aspects are very important, and we are working with my colleagues and, of course, our provincial counterparts.
Mr. Morantz, and then back to Ms. Kortrakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I just wanted to see if you could reconcile something for the folks that are watching today. And I know you're fond of talking about, and we would have different views on this, about how Prime Minister Harper handled the economy, and you've made that point over and over and over. But you have to look at yourself as well. And back in the 2015 campaign, you made commitments to voters, as did the Prime Minister, that the budget would be balanced in 2019. I went back last night and I read over some of the personal statements that you uttered. I'm sure you recall making those statements. And as well, in your mandate letter, and the first item in the mandate letter is from the Prime Minister to you, is that you will continue to reduce the government's debt as a function of our economy. So that's number one on the list. So I'm assuming it was very important to the Prime Minister that you maintain that. In the last fiscal update, the debt to GDP ratio actually rose, and that's no longer an anchor that you can lay claim to, at least for the time being. Hopefully you'll improve. But getting back to the issue of the promise, I wonder if you can reconcile this. So the 2019-20 budget originally projected a $19.8 billion deficit. In your update, you said it would be $26.6 billion. I'm just wondering, if you look at, I guess my question is, how do you reconcile what you said and promised personally to the Canadian voters? before they actually place their trust in you, and what has actually happened.
Well, thanks, and welcome to this committee. It's the first time we've had the opportunity to work together. These are really important questions. I think they're important because we need to be transparent with Canadians on how we're trying to manage the economy that benefits Canadians today and puts us in a good position moving forward. Of course, when we came into office in 2015, I know you'll remember what we were facing. We were facing a difficult situation. Oil prices were in the midst of going down significantly, and they continued to go down. In fact, they didn't reach their lowest point until significantly after we got into office. And we've been in a sustained challenge in terms of that part of our economy for a while. We came to the conclusion that what we needed to do was to ensure that our economy remained resilient, which means that we had to continue to maintain our low debt to GDP, which provided us with the resilience in terms of changes in the economy. And that's why the Prime Minister put as my number one mandate objective in this mandate is to continue reducing that. Look, you mentioned the numbers. I mean, obviously, the debt to GDP has gone down since the Conservative government. It has gone down. It is lower today than it was when we came into office. That's not it's not an assertion. That just is fact. And we intend on continuing to make sure that happens. At the same time, we have a responsibility to Canadians. I mean, the fact that we've been able to reduce unemployment to pretty much the lowest certainly the lowest that you and I have seen in our lifetimes, is hugely important. We have people working. That's not only really great for them and their families, it's great for our economy. The low level of unemployment is leading to wage increases. And of course, both those things together mean that our economy continues to grow. So we will continue to make sure that our balance sheet is strong, which we've done, and we will continue to work around that particular measure that you brought up, the debt to GDP, to reduce that over time, because we know that we need to be prepared for any challenges. And if we look around the world, we realize that there are challenges, some that we understand and some that might be around the corner. So that's why we need to keep a resilient.
Cut there, Minister, so that there's a very quick question from Marty. Go ahead.
P ratio. And,
sorry, I didn't hear the beginning.
Sorry, there are a number of factors that relate to the debt to GDP ratio. Many of these factors you had the information to make your determination before the 2015 election. But be that as it may, just on to another question, and it has to do with, and it directly relates to the deficits. It has to do with the corporate welfare. In my constituency, people are constantly asking me about this. I'm getting emails, calls, $50 million to MasterCard, millions to BlackBerry and Loblaws. The one that I just kind of can't get over is $17,000 on 5,000 rubber ducks for the communication security establishment. Given these kinds of inept decisions, how can you assure Canadians that their money is being well spent when balanced budgets were promised by you personally out of your own mouth, a promise that was not kept, and all you're delivering is these ballooning deficits?
Well, I will come back to the importance of outcomes, the importance of being able to recover from a low growth rate. It just can't be overstated. We found ourselves with a difficult situation, and we all recognize that there still continues to be real challenge in parts of our country, but not dealing with that, I think, would have been irresponsible. And having high unemployment at the time when we came into office of in excess of 7% was an issue that we had to deal with. And so, we have dealt with it, but it's not one that we can ever stop thinking about, because there are still people in places like in Alberta and Saskatchewan where people are going through real challenge. So we are going to continue to do that. We will work to take responsible decisions around making investments together with whether it's businesses, people that are going to create economic opportunity. That's something that I think we should be proud of and see that we've made real strides in terms of employment. And we'll need to continue to be responsible in how we do that. I appreciate your point on that. And it's certainly something that I reinforce with my colleagues at every turn.
Thank you. Over to Ms. Katrakis and back to Mr. Cummings, and keep them as tight as we can. We're a little over in every round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, it's everybody's fault.
Thank you, Minister Morneau, for appearing before.
Oui, c'est ça. No, mais on doit avoir le...
No, that's right. But we have to look at the situation. It's true. It's your problem, Mr. Chair.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Morneau, for appearing before the Finance Committee this afternoon. In my riding in Vimy-Laval, we have dozens of senior residences and autonomous living facilities, some of which have more than 100 apartments. Seniors have worked hard to help build Canada, and in retirement, they sometimes need help. Just as they worked hard for our country, I believe it is very important for us to work hard for them. Canada has many impactful programs and benefits to directly improve seniors' quality of life. However, one of the most important questions that I keep hearing from my constituents is, what will happen to my spouse when I move on, when I'm gone? Minister Morneau, can you please elaborate on what work you are doing on survivor benefits, both in Canada and in my home province of Quebec?
Well, thank you, and it's also the first time that you've been in this committee, at least while I've been here, so it's nice to have your question. This has been a really important issue for generations of governments as we think about how we deal with the reality of an aging population. And increasingly, with people spending more years in retirement, that's a challenge. And if unfortunately one spouse dies, the other one can be left alone for a long period of time. So I understand the question. We've certainly been working to try and improve outcomes for seniors since day one. So the increase in the guaranteed income supplement was critically important. That helped tens of thousands of seniors. The decision to make sure that people could retire at age 65 was important, especially for lower and middle income seniors who often are in a situation where they can't necessarily work more years. So we've done a number of things. The survivor's benefit is something that I've heard from people as an issue. Of course, that's something that as we think about making changes, we do need to work together with provinces, because I think what you're referring to is something that goes through the Canada Pension Plan, and the governance of the Canada Pension Plan is the government of Canada, but also the provinces. So it's something that is on the agenda of that group. We get together, the ministers of finance, who are the stewards of the Canada Pension Plan, get together once for sure, normally twice per year, and we have discussions about how we can both ensure that the plan is funded appropriately and that it meets the objectives that we're trying to achieve. Survivor's benefit is one of those objectives, and making sure it's up to date with the changes that are going through in longevity is important. So it's a continuing discussion. I'm an advocate for making sure the system works, and we'll take back your point of view to that group.
Thank you for doing that. And on behalf of all the seniors in my riding, it's great news. And I really hope that we're all aligned with the provinces as well, to get it done. Thank you.
Mr. Fraser, or Mr. McLeod, a very quick one. Still time left on that side.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the...
Nice haircut, by the way.
Noticed.
What about mine?
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the government Northwest Territories situation in terms of hitting their debt wall. That is something that's very concerning for us in the Northwest Territories. We need to look at the borrowing limit. It's one of the jurisdictions that has a federally imposed borrowing limit, and look at the options. The option is there to take some of the revenue generating debt out of it, the self-generating debt out of it, or else increase the limit. Was that something that you are looking at right now and considering? I know the government of Northwest Territories has made that request.
In fact, I've heard that request not just from that government. So the borrowing limits in the territories are an issue of significant interest because of the interest in each territory in being engaged in infrastructure development. So the own source revenues or borrowings is important. We've been looking at this issue. It's something that we need to we need to look at carefully to make sure that we consider it responsibly, but we are looking at it, and I have responded to those territories that it's something that we're looking at and considering quite seriously, because we understand the issue, we understand the rationale for each one of those territories, and there'll be more to say on this, I hope, in the not-too-distant future.
We'll have to end that round there. We'll come over to Mr. Cummings, and we will be back to you next, Mr. McLeod. Michael, we'll be back to you next. Mr. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. From where I come from, Alberta, it's certainly not the rosy picture that you paint. We saw witness after witness talk about the unemployment rate, the dire straits the resource sector is in, unemployment, bankruptcies up, very concerning. And but what they did come clear with is that they're not looking for bailouts. What they're looking to do is be able to get their product to market and be able to contribute to the Canadian economy. My question is very specific. When will TMX be in service?
Well, again, I haven't been here with you, so it's good to get a question. Like you, I mean, I don't hail from Alberta, but I've spent a lot of time there both before I got into office and while being in office. And I fully appreciate that the challenges are very real. They're very real for individuals who are out of work, and they're real for businesses that are trying to figure out how they can get access to capital, how they can actually continue on their successful business strategies. We absolutely agree that there is nobody's been asking us in Alberta for a bailout or aid. What they're asking for is how they can be successful. Absolutely believe that getting access to international markets for our resources, getting a fair price for our resources is critically important. That is an enabler for the oil and gas sector. The company came out, Trans Mountain Corporation, and answered your question just a couple weeks ago and told us what their estimate of the timeline for that pipeline conclusion was, and that is in late 2022. So that is the information that we're working with right now, and we're working hard to make sure that we enable that as best we can, although the company is, as you know, operated independently on a commercial basis.
So I want to come back to tech. What is the cost to the Canadian economy if we do not approve this project, and specifically what is the cost to the Alberta and Saskatchewan economies?
You mean, just for clarification for those watching, you mean Tech Frontier?
Tech Frontier.
Okay.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are in a position right now where this is coming to cabinet in the very near future. We will have to consider all of the reviews that it's gone through in order to get to a conclusion that makes sense for our country, and that is the process that we're going through right now, which is quite a rigorous one. We look forward to having more to say on that in the not too distant future.
What message would you give to resource companies that are working in Alberta, expecting this project that went through all the environmental reviews, expecting its approval, and outside investors if this project is not approved?
I appreciate the question, but it is truly a hypothetical question, and as I've said, now is not the time for us to answer that question because it is going through a review process, and as we finalize that decision, there will be more to be said, and I will look forward to being part of that and appropriately answering questions based on the conclusions we get to.
Time for a very quick one, James.
I would disagree. It's hypothetical that they went through a review process and that it's been recommended, and it's not hypothetical. In fact, the resource companies in Alberta are expecting, and they're looking forward to seeing this approval, and they don't view it as a hypothetical.
I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly. I did not say that anything to do with the process that has gone through is in any way anything other than real important work. We just haven't gotten to a conclusion yet. So since we haven't gotten to a conclusion, we're not yet ready to talk about an approach to communicating with Canadians any Canadians, because we are still doing that review. And at the time that we get to that conclusion, based on the rigorous analysis that's gone on, we would be happy to discuss this.
Okay, thank you both. Over to Mr. McLeod, and then back to Mr. St. Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and once again, thank you for coming and presenting in front of us. In your presentation, you talk about the economy doing well, and we've talked about this issue before, but while the national indicators remain strong, there's still parts of Canada that are struggling, I think, not growing as fast as we'd like to see it. In the Northwest Territories, our economy is growing at a slower pace. It's causing a lot of concern with my constituents. The diamond mines are starting to hit a point where they're going to be past their production peak pretty soon, and there's really no other industry to offset this decline. And there's two pieces that keep coming forward as ways to boost our economy, and that is, first of all, to deal with the land tenure and governance issue with our Indigenous people in the Northwest Territories. If we want to move forward, we really need to have the Indigenous people as full partners at the decision-making table. And it's been slow going. The discussions are not going as fast as we'd like. In fact, I belong to the Deschutes First Nations, and I was a young teenager when we started our negotiations, and 50 years later, we're still trying to sort out the issues and come to an arrangement. So it's a long time, and it's hard to understand why it would take 50 years to try to negotiate an agreement with a population of 2,000 people. And it's really something that I think we need to put a lot more focus on. The reconciliation for us with our Indigenous people is tied to the growth of the economy. We have a land freeze, a good part of the Northwest Territories that will not be lifted until we sort out the land tenure and governance issues. So I think we need to put a lot more attention on that. The last government, we put a lot of attention on the national Indigenous organizations. Maybe this time we need to switch that focus. And we also need, and we hear from Chamber of Mines, Chamber of Commerce, we need more investment in infrastructure. We need more roads. We need better airports. We need bigger airports. We've done pretty good with the last government, but I think the deficit is so huge that we need to continue to look at what we can do. So I just wanted to speak to what the efforts of the Government of Canada are in taking towards supporting regional economies, more specifically in the north, to both growth and diversification.
Well, first of all, I think you're identifying, a challenge that Mr. Cummings was identifying as well, and that is that as we've seen economic success in our country over the last number of years, it has not been distributed evenly, and that is, I suppose, inevitable in a country as large and varied as Canada, but one of the very real challenges for our government. So. As we talked about, we're working hard to think about how we can improve the economy in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and I think as well Newfoundland and Labrador. And I think we also need to think, as you've said, about how we can ensure that we're making impacts in the north, where I recognize that there are some places that are not doing well at all. So it's an important reminder. The 50 years that you're talking about, I guess I don't have a lot of insights into the 45 years before we got into power, but in our government we've been working hard to try and come to new fiscal relations where we can with First Nations groups. We've been working hard to think about our infrastructure challenges in parts of the country that are going through significant challenges, in some cases challenges related to climate change, things like reducing permafrost, which cause big infrastructure deficits. And we've also been thinking about how we can advantage particular parts of the economy that have different situations, different parts of the country. So the mining exploration tax credit, for example, that I know has a big impact in the north, we extended it for 5 years, as you know, recently, to try and give more long-term assurance to that sector of the economy, which is obviously one of the biggest drivers for economic success in the North. But that's not me saying that we've done everything that we can do. I do think we need to work together to think about the challenges you've brought to my attention on numerous occasions, the different situation with Indigenous peoples in the Northwest Territories versus in other parts of the North, and I think that's appreciated, which we need to continue to work on to make sure that we make improvement. And 50 years plus 13, does that mean 63? Is that the math I'm doing right now?
Thank you both. We'll have to cut you there. I'm conscious of your time, Mr. Minister. So, Mr. St. Marie, if you could keep it to one quick question, and the same to Mr. Julian.
Yes, Mr. Minister. When we look at the U.S. and Europe, the aerospace sector receives a lot of government support. European countries and the U.S. have a lot of policies of support for these aerospace sectors, which are very profitable but take a long time to become profitable. Canada has no national aeronautics policy. Are you considering developing such a policy? I wish to remind you that it's a crucial sector for the Quebec economy. When our producer needs help, they turn to Quebec, and Quebec is able to help out. But in the West, in the economy, there are announcements of up to $20 billion. Automobile sector in Ontario, we're talking about $10 billion. The Maritimes and BC with their naval strategy, and the maritime strategy, and Newfoundland with their hydroelectric power station. Are you considering adopting a serious policy for the aeronautics sector? Thank you. I know it is a very important sector for Quebec, and I know that several times we've been able to step in and assist the sector in Quebec. And I know that my colleague, Navdeep Bains, the Minister of ISED, continues to consider how we can improve the situation for that sector, and it is ongoing. So, of course, we're going to continue having discussions with yourselves and your colleagues, and also with colleagues from Quebec, to make sure that the sector is well positioned for now and for the future. The industry is asking for the policy.
And then Mr. Cooper and Ms. O'Connell will wrap it up. Mr. Julian.
I'm just going to come back to two questions you haven't answered yet, Mr. Morneau. First, on the issue of Trans Mountain, $17 billion and counting. What is the cap? What is the limit that the federal government is willing to put public funds into the project? Is it $20 billion? Is it $25 billion? Or is the sky the limit? The other question that you didn't answer in the first round was the issue, since the Ministry of Finance disputes the PBO's figures of $25 billion going to overseas tax havens, what are the internal figures that you have in terms of the money that should be going to support programs and Canadians, but is instead going to overseas tax havens? If these figures, the PBO's figures, aren't right, what are the figures you have?
Well, thank you for the question. So on the first question around Trans Mountain, what we've said is, we want to make sure that this project deals with the very real challenge we faced politically, and that's why we took it on, and that it continues to be of benefit to all Canadians. The company came out and told us that at their expectation of the cost to develop, that this is a commercially important project, and one on which the Canadian approach will ensure that we make a profit. And so that's where we're at on that. We believe that this is the right thing for us to do to deal with a political challenge, and are continuing to move forward based on the positive economics of the project. With respect to the estimates around tax expenditures, I think, as you may know, we put out an annual review of tax expenditures. That's really an OECD best practice that Canada follows. That report will be out soon. And in that report, you will find voluminous information. I know because I reviewed it just before I came here today. It's a long and arduous report to get through, Andrew, so thank you for that. And that will provide more information. When is that public? Do we know?
With the main estimates.
with the Maine estimates. So that will be out in the not too distant future.
Okay, thank you all. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours, and the final one will be Mr. O'Connell. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister. At a time while your government has been delivering massive deficits and debt, your government has also been delivering massive waste, $50 million for MasterCard, $12 million for Loblaws, $40 million for BlackBerry, $600 million media bailout, $256 million to build pipelines in Azerbaijan. But I want to ask you about the $372 million bailout to Bombardier in 2017, which Bombardier in turn laid off 3,000 workers while senior executives gave themselves a 50% pay hike. On what date will that loan be repaid?
Well, thank you for the question. I think first, I think we need to address the decisions that our government's been making around the stewardship of the economy. And I hope that Canadians would look at our economic situation and realize that with the kinds of unemployment rates we have today and with a continuing growth in our economy, that we've made decisions that are putting us in a strong position, and we'll continue to work to make sure that we're fiscally responsible while maintaining a good situation. The Bombardier company decisions over the last couple of weeks in terms of the changes in their organization are ones that they, of course, took independently to protect the company and the workers. We hope in Quebec and across the country. We have been assured that any repayable contributions will be repayable under the new ownership. And, we certainly hope that success for that company, as well as for all companies, continues. And I will be watching carefully to see that.
Mr. Minister,
Last question.
I asked for the date. When will that loan be repaid? And will it be repaid with interest?
The assurances I've received are that any terms that we've had previously will be maintained.
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. Thanks for appearing. Actually, my questions follow up in terms of what you said in your opening statement about the questions posed to Canadians about growing the economy, staying competitive, and especially with some of my Conservative colleagues and their questions. One of the things that this government inherited was the worst growth since the Great Depression, and unemployment rates that were far too high for a country like ours. And it's through innovative thinking and policies and investments in Canadians that we've been really able to turn it around, as you spoke about. So perhaps you can help my friends across the way understand why these investments are important. And in particular, I'd like you to speak on one of the things that I think we don't talk about enough, and I can see why the Conservatives wouldn't want to, because they weren't quite innovative, and this is why their growth rates reflected that. But the Canada Training Benefit, and why this investment in Canadians to ensure that they can adapt to a changing economy is so important for our future.
Well, thank you. It is. I appreciate your opening commentary. I think we need to recognize that that we've made investments. The economy has recovered from where it was in 2015, early 2016, but there are still significant challenges, both to our economy and to the global environment that we always need to be paying attention to. So, being fiscally responsible, to be prepared for those challenges is important. And I think when you think about the Canada Training Benefits, it's really about how individuals can be prepared for challenges that they are likely to face during the course of their career. So we are working to think about ways that we can ensure Canadians are prepared for a fast-moving economy and recognizing that most training dollars in Canada have gone through the employment insurance system, we were looking at ways that we could help people while they're at work to improve and upgrade their skills. So the Canada Training Benefit was put in place with that objective in mind. It is really three things together. It's allowing people to every 4 years take up to 4 weeks off from work. It's enabling them to have a tax credit, $250 a year, so $1,000 every 4 years, so they could put that money towards a training course. And finally, it's an employment insurance payment, so they could continue to pay the rent and groceries while they're off. And the idea is that people, therefore, can upgrade their skills in their current job or prepare themselves for a next job. We're going to need to keep thinking about this so that we can have the kind of fast-paced and exciting opportunity for Canadians that this economy produces without the real risk that people see that they won't be prepared for that. And there will be things that we'll need to continue to consider, but I think the Canada Training Benefit will be an important foundational measure that can enable people over time to keep their skills upgraded to what they need.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Minister, for coming. We're a little bit over time. I appreciate that we're able to get all members on in terms of the question and answer. Just for your information, Minister, we will have our pre-budget consultation report to you or into the House on February 28th. For committee members, the recommendations from all parties will get to back to all members today at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I'd just like to remind all parties there's a lot of recommendations there, and if you can review your own from your own party concept and try and cull them down a little, it would be helpful, because we meet tomorrow from 11 to 2:30, till 11 till 2, and 3:30 till 6:30, and the amount of recommendations we have to go through is immense. Peter.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. I threw you to the analysts. If it's possible to group the recommendations that will be, I think, similar, but in many cases, but worded differently, I think that may allow us to cull through a little more quickly. It's a big job, but it would make it easier if we've got the grouping around recommendations.
The analysts won't have time by 3 today, but maybe when we get them tomorrow, we can have them grouped.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone on the committee, and we look forward to getting your report. I've seen how many people you've met with and how many recommendations. So you don't make the job easier, but we will do our best to take into account all of your recommendations and come to conclusions that make sense. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.